Hi everyone, my name is Sandra Rostirolla and I'm an author, and I was just interviewed by Keith Andrew on the Keith Andrew Network. He is amazing and he's doing a terrific job. If you get the opportunity to come on the show with him, I highly recommend it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Keith Andrew Network. We are here on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and all social medias. Today, we sit down with upcoming book author. You don't just have one, you have two, but you have three amazing books where we're going to talk about. Today's episode is brought to you by PG-13 and brought to you by the Keith Andrew Network, available on all social medias. First question I want to ask you is tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what made you want to become a writer.
Hey there, Keith. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your show. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm originally from Australia. Those of you that should be able to tell with my accent, came over to America on a professional visa. I graduated my university with a Bachelor of Applied Science, and I became a licensed physical therapist. And I was recruited straight out of university to come to America because at the time America was starving for physios to work in the hospitals. And then from there, I always had a desire to write, but I never really followed that path because I'm a STEM girl. I'm physics, chemistry, math, and that's where I excelled, and the teachers just pushed me down that path. But it really wasn't until I got to Los Angeles, the creative mecca of the world, and I was right next to UCLA, and UCLA had a bunch of extension programs where I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go take a few classes, took some story analysis classes, and then from there just kept dipping my foot into the water, started to write screenplays. And I'm an accidental because my husband, who is a composer, he wanted to write a ballet, and a ballet needs a ballet story. So I helped him write the ballet story, and that ballet story basically became this. It ended up becoming a full, complete novel, and the ballet was never written. So I ended up taking this little story and converting it into this big book, which then became book 2 and book 3. So from just a very simple little going, you know what, I'm going to help you write a ballet story, which should have only been 5 to 10 pages. I now have a complete YA trilogy, fantasy trilogy. So that's sort of my forefront into writing. And then from there, I ended up writing this 4th book, which is coming out April 4th. And this is what I'm promoting at the moment, Making Friends with Monsters, which is a step away from the fantasy. It's a YA coming of age, but it's a story that's really close to my heart because it deals with mental health issues for teens, dealing with big emotions, and ultimately the underlying theme is suicide prevention is ultimately what this story is about. But we can get into that in more detail if there's any specific questions. So is that like a good little rundown of my life, Keith? Does that, I meant to say, does that give you the cliff notes of my life story, Keith?
No, absolutely. Hashtag absolutely. And I actually turn that into a hashtag because I keep saying absolutely. Yesterday I was doing an interview and I was nodding and I was like, are you okay? He stopped talking, but you're still. Yes, I agree with you. I don't have Tourette's or something. But no, I absolutely agree with you. And and for the record, suicide is not an answer. There's always one. I think there's a 1-800 number. I don't have it, but that's not what it's called. 1-800. I don't have the number, but there is a 1-800 number for people out there. There's always someone to talk to. We could always talk about that off the air, but there will be something on the screen. I have to find it if there's like a green screen before that. But like you said, it's about being upfront. Your book says Making Friends with Monsters. Looking back at my high school year, I accepted the fact that I have a learning disability, and I was more open to it. It's like, hey, yo, I have a disability. What do you want to do? You want to fight about it? But, I wasn't that type of person. I was the type of person of keeping my head down, shutting up. I don't have a bald spot, by the way. I'm basically keeping my head down, getting through the classes. I'm not the same person who I was 16 years ago. Maybe if someone kicked me in my ass and said, you have a weakness, but it doesn't mean you can't use it as a strength. And so I can relate to your book because, it can also relate to people too. I'm always making friends with people, trying to make friends. Some of those people are wonderful people. And yes, like the bottom part of your book, some people are monsters. So let me ask you, what inspired you to come up with the title, Making Friends with Monsters? Have you made friends with monsters?
So the monster is our own inner little monster that we have. And I mean, the title, gosh, I can give you the quick little rundown why I even wrote the story. I was back in Australia doing a book signing for my first book, Cecilia, the Last Correlatia. And my friend told me her devastating story, how that 2 years prior, her ex had died by suicide, leaving her with 3 children. And she said the toughest part was when her daughters would ask, Mummy, why did Daddy do it? She said, because I just don't know what to say. So in my family, my dad died by suicide when I was 13, and I've also had 2 brothers die by suicide as well. So I've certainly been on the receiving end of suicide more than what most people need to. And silence is always the big thing. Silence about, for the people who are left behind, why did so-and-so do it? And then the silence for the person who ends up dying by suicide that doesn't feel like they can express their internal emotions. They, feel trapped, and they feel like that no one will understand, no one will listen. So I'm sort of tackling that silence from both ends, and that's why I wrote this book, Making Friends with Monsters. And I'm not 100% sure where the title came up, but I just sort of thought, monsters, I wanted something that teens and kids could relate to. And this idea that you've got this little thing inside you, this little creature that's either making you feel angry or scared or frustrated, and making you feel all these emotions that you don't want to feel, and feeling like this little thing's controlling you. Now, the premise of the book is not to say don't have those emotions. The premise is actually it's completely fine to have those emotions. Anger is a normal, natural emotion, but we should have it. If you're angry, be angry. Where it becomes problematic is when we let these emotions take over and define us, and they become us. Then that is this concept that your monster has now taken over. And if that happens, your monster can turn around and swallow you whole, which is the metaphor for you could potentially, you don't want to do this, but die by suicide if your monster takes over. So the premise of Making Friends with Monsters is making friends with yourself and your inner feelings, and being okay with yourself and your inner feelings. That's the story in a nutshell of why I wrote the book. And so far it seems to be resonating really, really well. The critical reviews have been great. Book Life, which is part of Publishers Weekly, put me on their editor's pick. Kirkus, which is anyone that knows anything about writing and reviews, they're a big one, and I got a Kirkus star, which apparently is a very rare thing to get. I'm getting endorsements by counsellors, teachers, librarians. So people are reading the book and they're feeling the message of how important it is to talk, and they're all relating to my little character, little 12-year-old Sam, and his desire to find the monsters in his family and in himself, and to tame them. So
no, absolutely. While we're on the subject, I knew 2 people. There's a story behind a story on this one, but a long story short, behind a story in the story is my cousin committed suicide. He supposedly he was pushed or he jumped in front of a train. I don't really know, and no one will ever know. And someone who I used to admire, Ashley Mazalis, a former WWE wrestler, she actually committed suicide. And actually, recently, about, let's see, it's March, so about like January, February, Jason David Frank, he came out and he said, I'm having a hard time. I'm going through a divorce, but I'm staying strong. And then the next day, as soon as he posted the video, he killed himself. But it's easy to fall into a downward spiral. But how you look at your life, it's two things happens to you. Either someone puts someone in your life. I'll give you an example. You're here right now. You're here for one or two reasons. One, that you're meant to be here and we're meant to be friends, or you're here to teach me a lesson. God, not to talk about religion or anything, but God puts people in your lives for two reasons, because they're meant to be here or they're trying to teach you something. And it's a marathon. Life is a marathon. You're gonna meet a lot of good people, you're gonna meet a lot of crappy people, but you shouldn't take it personally. I'm not gonna look at the camera, I'm not gonna directly look at you, but I am, I've been doing this for so long, you think I get used to it. But the point is, it's easy to knock someone down. It's easy to keep someone down. But to fight in the good fight, it does take positive energy. And it is a battle. But the point is, you keep going and make yourself into a better person. And when you turn yourself into a better person, you inspire and light everyone up around you, and you make them better people. If that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that part of what I'm doing is helping to destigmatize the whole aspect of suicide. I think that was what caused my family a lot of grief, because there was a lot of stigma surrounding it. And a new phrase that we tend to talk about in the suicide world is die by suicide instead of committing suicide. That phrasing, we try not to use that anymore, because committing, first of all, sounds like it's a crime, like you commit a crime, whereas a death by suicide is no different. If you consider that suicide is more of a disease, it's no different to a death by cancer, and you wouldn't ever say that someone committed cancer. So part of my outreach of what I'm doing is to educate everyone, because even for myself, it was really only recently. I'd grown up since I was 13 saying that my dad committed suicide, because that's the terminology I knew. But probably, I think around 2018, it became a big push to change that to death by suicide, or that someone died by suicide. So that's the other little thing I'd like your listeners to know about helping to destigmatize suicide.
I agree. Now, the next two questions I want to ask you is, are you a ghostwriter, number one? And with everything that you accomplish in writing books, actually I have to look at my question for this one. As a writing professional, what experience do you have in leading people to write their own books?
What experience do I have in, what was that, sorry?
Leading people to write their own books. Leading, like you can lead somebody.
Lead?
Yes.
Leading?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, you asked, am I a ghostwriter? No, haven't been a ghostwriter, won't ever be a ghostwriter. Me personally, I don't believe in that kind of thing. If you're an artist and you're a creator, you should always get credit for your art and your creation. Ghostwriters, at least what we know, the terminology is usually they're this unseen, unheard person. And even if someone has a biography, like a star, yeah, usually they bring on quote unquote a ghostwriter, but I always believe that person should always be credited. There should never be an unnamed source writing your story for you. So, and then what was the other part? Have I ever taught people? Is that what it was? Do I
Well, it
teaching
says
people
as a
writing?
coach, but I'm taking a coach out and I'm replacing it as a writer. So it's
Yeah,
the original question was, as a coach, what experience do you have in leading other people? So I'm taking coach
right.
out, so I'm changing that with writer.
Yes. Okay. Um, I've never directly helped anyone write. I do have a writer group. We've been together for about 8 years, a close group of friends. We all met in a workshop together. Primarily, my friends all write screenplays, and I'm one of the few in my group that writes novels. But we always help each other by reading each other's work and giving feedback. But I've only ever given general feedback to people that just ask me, how do you write a novel? And I'm like, there is no specific way to write a novel. I mean, just like Stephen King said, one word at a time is pretty much all you can do. But I do tell people to outline. Outlining is very difficult, and I know a lot of people don't like doing it. When I first started writing, I didn't outline. I would just write the story. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. There is a school of thought that what you do is you develop your characters, but you make sure you develop them very, very round. You know, you should have a list of the character traits, and you need to know your backstory about your characters. And so you come up with these well-defined characters, you put them in a room together, and you let them tell you their story. There is nothing wrong with that approach. I just have learned ever since writing Cecilia book one, because it was a very basic ballet story that we came up with. It was just so nice to have this spine that I knew where the story was going. I knew I was going to start off in the forest with this innocent, and I knew these dark raiders were going to come in and raid Cecilia's forest, and that everyone was going to die except for her, and the soldiers were going to steal all the young men, you know, and I knew she was going to go off on a journey and ultimately become this hero and go from an innocent into a warrior princess. And that to me was, I loved knowing that I had this spine to follow, because it just, whenever I had writer's block, at least I knew, I'm like, this is my true north. I've got to stay on my true north and just figure out a way to get there. So the two things I always tell upcoming writers is make sure you have a spine or an outline, and then don't go back and reread. That will be the death of moving forward. The temptation always is, you know, if you haven't, maybe you missed a day or it's the next day, you'll go, oh, let me go back and reread. That'll take you, you know, hours to do that. And then all of a sudden you end up writing only 3 words, you get called away, and you just get stuck in this reread, re-edit kind of phase. Don't do that. Just keep soldiering on. There'll be plenty of time after you've got your first draft out to then go back and do all your edits. So they're my 2 nuggets. That's all I know how to teach people of how to write.
No, I agree with you. Now, the next one I want to ask you is, how do you build a character?
How do I build a character? I usually make sure that I I do have a cheat sheet, which I don't have in front of me. And the cheat sheet has a whole bunch of questions that helps me answer, like little things. What's the character's favorite color? You know,
So the question I want to ask you next is, what is the most rewarding part of being a writer?
the most rewarding part, gosh, I would have to say in general, the most rewarding part is when you get feedback and people just connect with your story and your characters, and they feel like the book is written for them. You know, that's just the best when you're connecting at that level. But a very specific story is with the first book I ever wrote, Cecilia, the Last Correlateer. I received a letter from a friend who had given this book off to one of the daughters of one of her friends, and she wanted to be a judge in a writing competition, and in order to be the judge she needed to write a reason why. And she wrote that she read Cecilia the Last Correlateer and she really loved the book so much it inspired her to want to be a judge for writing. Honestly, so random, so random, but to think that I influenced someone's potential career path is absolutely amazing. Totally amazing.
No, I agree with you 100%. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, why is he looking sideways? Because I'm so used to looking directly at the guest. Now I'm staring at the camera. It feels weird just staring at the camera because I don't want to be like avoiding eye contact, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm at a freaking eye doctor's exam. So it's really annoying, but I guess you get used to it. But the next question I want to ask you is everything that you were written about. So, question is, after you create a character, how do you know when it's time to put them away? And do you still think about other ideas for that character?
Oh my gosh. I was talking about this with another writer the other day. We were at a networking event, and the pain we go through as authors. Someone said we need to start a healing group for any author that has finished a story, because it's really sad. Like it's hard to let go of our characters. And yeah, we sort of do have these sub stories that we want to continue. I mean, look at what I did with Cecilia. I mean, I just very much loved the love story that I had built between Cecilia and Amelard, who had started off as an assassin who was meant to kill her, but this is an enemies to lovers tale. And I just didn't want their relationship to stop. So I wrote a trilogy with Making Friends with Monsters. I do have a little nugget in my head about jumping back into Sam's life, where in his life when he's 12, I'm thinking of jumping back into his life when he's now 17. Don't know, don't ask me why. Don't ask me why, but I just feel like I want to come back into his life again. And I think because he's got a love interest, and when he was 12, I didn't really want to explore that love interest too deeply because he's a bit young. But I figure if he's 17, we can get a little bit more, I don't want to say intimate, but we can get a little bit more juicy, with the love interest. So I'm thinking about that. But how do you know when they're done? I mean, honestly, I guess it's the plot, right? I mean, you do get to a point in the story where someone's gone through an arc. We go to the movies, everything sort of has a beginning, middle, and end. And after a while, even the reader's like, yeah, okay, I'm sort of done with this character, because if the plot's not advancing, if there's no conflict left, you kind of need to stop the story, which means you sort of got to let go of your character.
Absolutely. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but with the last 4 minutes, I'll pass it over to you. What's coming up on the horizon, and how can our fans and listeners get in touch with you?
Well, again, what's coming up on the horizon is this. You can see it in the background. Releases April 4th. Any listeners that are in Los Angeles, I'm actually having a launch event at the Village Well and Bookstore, Books and Coffee in Culver City. You can go to my website, www.slrostirolla.com. If you go to the events section, the event is up there. It'll give you all the details. Come along. You can meet me in person. You can get a signed copy of the book. All my handles, everything. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. Did I say TikTok? And everything is at SL Rostirolla. S for Sandra, L for Louise, my last name Rostirolla. So I'm pretty easy to find out there in the cyberspace.
No, absolutely. And the same thing, you should do a hashtag too.
Hashtag, oh, no, my hashtag, the big one I've got going at the moment is hashtag Making Friends with Monsters, hashtag mental health awareness, hashtag suicide prevention.
Well, for me, all you have to do is hashtag one word, hashtag KeithAndrewNetWork, and you get to see all my work.
Oh,
Also,
very nice.
my new hashtag is hashtag talk show host with a disability, learning disability. I
Okay.
mean, there is another one, disabilities, but I'm like, let's make it simple. Talk show host with a disability. But next, I do have some great ideas I'd like to talk to you about. But wrapping up, do you have any funny stories you like to share? Any funny pranks?
Oh, damn it, not off the top of my head. If I had been prepared, I probably could have thought, and I guarantee as soon as we get off, I'll be like, this is what I should have told Keith. But I don't have anything.
Nothing to worry about. All your information will be in the description. The links to your books will also be there. But I want to ask you this question. Usually I do it for off the air, but let's just have fun with it. When I
Okay.
first approached you to be a guest in my talk show, what made you say yes? How do you feel now? And do you recommend it to other people?
I said yes because as an author, a creator, we need to get as much exposure as possible. And quite truthfully, the fact that you came to me, it was just a complete honor. It was totally an honor. So it was just a no-brainer to say yes. And then I went and looked at some of your interviews and I'm like, he just seems like a really cool guy, the really cool guy to have a sit down and chat with. So I'm really glad I did it. For anyone else, if Keith Andrew reaches out to you and invites you on his show, please be honored and say yes. It was definitely a lot of fun. I really enjoyed myself.
No, I appreciate that. So wrapping up our show, a big thank you to our guests being a guest. A big thank you for you being here on the KeithAndrew Network. Our fans and listeners, if you want to see part two, our goal is to reach 100 and more views. So let's help our guests get 100 views, leave comments. What do you want to hear us talk about next time? By wrapping up our talk show, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. And I'm looking forward to part two down the road. Until we meet again, catch you later.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.